Now that we have our dice set up, it's time to turn this into a real text dungeon crawler. The first thing I'm going to do here is minimize my dice class since we've already tested it, and create a new class for my character. I'm going to be inheriting from the default object, and we're going to add a few attributes here in the init method. We're going to be starting our character off fairly simply, but we're going to need a few attributes. Let's give it a health attribute, a max health attribute, an attack, don't need a space there, and a defense. Let's start our player character with 100 health, so 100 max health as well, and let's use our fancy dice object to decide its attack and defense. I'm going to do this in a few lines just to make it a little easier to read. So we're going to have our attack roll, and we're going to have our dice object. We want to roll a d6. Let's have it be the best 2 out of 3. So we'll roll 3 dice object and save that as our attack roll. And then down here we'll do attack roll dot highest 2, and just to make sure it's an int dot value, and make sure I double check my spelling on all of this. And let's do the same thing for the defense. From here, I'm going to duplicate my character class to make my demon class, since they're going to be very similar, but I want them to be created slightly differently, because I want to be using it as part of the gameplay mechanics. The first difference I want to make is I want the health of the demon to be variable from one demon to the next. So let's add a health roll. I keep wanting to spell rule for some reason. And let's make this 6 d10s. And then we're going to take the highest 5 of those. And let's get the value to make sure that's an integer. And right here, let's just make sure, actually, make this clear for people. Then I can just use this variable twice. The next 2 attributes I want to add to my demon class is a name attribute and a description attribute, but I want to make it dependent on the health attribute. Let's do it if the health value is greater than 40 for one case. Just pass that for now. Do an elif. Health value is greater than 30. And then we can just do an else for the last one. So I think I'm actually going to change this to a 25, and then in each of these I'm going to add a self.name and a self.description. I won't make you watch typing in all of these names and descriptions, so I will be back in just a second. These names and descriptions are just to make the game a little more immersive. But I want to add one last attribute in here, which will be self.aggression. And here I'm going to make the greater demons really aggressive, I'm going to make it a scale out of 10. I'm going to make the normal demons partially aggressive, and I'm going to make the lesser demons not that aggressive. And I'm pretty sure I am missing a G. Now that our demons have names, let's set up a name for our character. And we want it so the player can name their own character. So let's just make it so there's a variable name that has to be passed in. And self.name equals name for now. And we'll do the verification within the game loop. And I think it's about time to start looking at our game class. So let's create a new class down here called game and inherit from object. And let's take a look at this init function quickly. The first attribute I'm going to add is a self.character, and I'm going to make it equal none for now so we can loop over for whenever player needs a new character. The second attribute we're going to need is some sort of exit variable, and we're going to default this to false. The next function we need to look at is going to be our run function. This is going to run our game. In here, we're going to have a while loop. So while not self.exit. The first thing we want to do in this game loop is make sure the player has created and named their character. So if not, self.character. Let's have them first create a name, and we can do this with the input function. And we give them a string that we want them to see to put in a name. Sure, that totally works for now. At the end of my string, I'm going to actually add a new line, \n, and then a prompt for them to add their name. Whoop. Make sure I do that on the outside. As a good formatting practice, I'm going to strip any white space that might be on the name just because of how they typed it in. Then I'm going to create a test name, and in case they have any spaces in the middle, I want to be able to check and make that available for them. So we're going to replace any spaces with nothing, and then test this name. And isAlpha will make sure that we're just getting alphabetic characters and we're not getting any weird symbols or whatever in the characters' names. And to make this a little easier on myself, I'll actually invert this. So if not test name.isAlpha, then we can just give a warning. So print, and I will fill that out in a second. And then we can just continue. And I think I'm going to actually let one other special character work in here, so we can do another replace and chain these. And let's let apostrophes also work. And the way this is set up at the moment, if this if statement doesn't catch, it will go to continue, which will just go back to the beginning of the while loop and ask them to name their character again. So after this point, we can assume they have a good name for their character. Let's now use that character name to generate a new character. And we can do that by making self.character equal character and pass in our new name. The next thing I'm going to add to this run function is going to be our input. And I want this to be in the while loop but outside of that if statement. And here we're going to have input, and let's save this as command for now. And let's build a string that's based off of the character. To do this, we're going to use the format function. So let's start creating our string and give a prompt here at the end. We want our character name, so we can use curly braces to fill that in later. Here we want HP, and we want to have a number with the max behind it so you get an idea. Then we want to have attack and defense. I actually like that lowercase better. Then to fill out these blanks, we can use the format method, .format, and give in what we want those values. So we can do character.name, character.health, character.maxHealth, character.attack, and character.defense. Next, we have to add our first acceptable command. So down here, we can strip this just to make sure there isn't any excess white space. And then we can check if command equals exit, and I'm going to dot lower this in case they capitalize it. Self.exit equals true, our loop will close. Else, let's print a warning. Make sure I have this in quotes. Whoop. Quotes will be a little more useful. That command is not recognized. So now we basically have one command option, exit, and everything else will be considered not recognized. But at least that gives us something we can test. Let's add a quick bit of test code out here. So essentially outside of this, we want to create a game and run it. And then we can click run up here. Let's give our name test our fancy naming, and whoop, character is not defined. So let's go to 102 and take a look at this, because it is self.character. So let's add self to each of these things and test again. It's always good to do some sanity testing. My name is now Bob. Hey, look at that. I have some stats. Low attack, decent defense. And anything I try, run. That command is not recognized. West. That command is not recognized. However, exit, whoop, if I spell it right, and even if I do weird caps, we get back to the command prompt. So the very basic version of our game is working. I'm going to clean up my formatting just a little bit by adding a space after my prompt. And then I'm going to go in and add a new print line. Let's make sure I am still within the while loop but outside of if statements. And I'm just going to print a new line to make it a little clearer where commands begin and end. So this wraps up part 2 of this tutorial. To rehash what we did, we expanded on our character class and created our demon class and started our initial game loop. The next part, we're going to be creating rooms and dungeons for our player and demons to explore. Thank you for checking out our part 2 of our Python text dungeon by Change Machine Labs. Peace.